I guess that's part of my problem is like, I've acknowledged it so much that I'm not scared of it anymore. Like I've acknowledged the demon side of life so much that it's nothing. Demons they are what they are. Right. Yeah, they should be respected on some level, I guess, because they are pretty powerful. But I don't have any fear of them. I would say that their counterparts or whatever are angels. And they're the ones that I typically work with when removing said things like that. So I
understand what you're saying. I don't necessarily have a fear per se, but it's not where my work is focused at all, obviously. Right. I mean, and I don't, but so many people at the beginning level do have fear about it.
It's a fine line because everyone is dealing with their own fear levels.
And, there was a point in time where I was scared, and I've grown less afraid as time has gone by.
When we're talking about stuff like that, it's hard. I mean, it's hard to not be scared or make it sound scary, or because it is what it is. Right. But I think the biggest thing that people are missing is the acknowledgement of it, this whole idea.
But do they need to acknowledge it? And that's, again, this is something for the show. It's like, do we need to acknowledge that? We don't need to embrace it, but
no, I think
does it matter that we know that it's there? I think most people do know that it's there. So what's the benefit of knowing that it's there?
I think the deception comes with evil when it tries to present itself as good. And I think that's where discernment is key. Otherwise, why the fuck are we, preaching discernment every other day of the week, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, you got to have discernment. Oh, you got to have discernment. Why? If everything is good and peachy hunky dory, why the fuck do I need discernment?
We have discernment walking around in the physical world. We get a gut reaction about somebody that we walk by, and we feel like that person is, not safe, and we move.
Right.
It's just an issue of survival and taking care of ourselves. We live in a physical world where safety is an illusion, right?
Right.
And safety can be an illusion in non-physical terms as well.
Right. But I think the biggest problem is just that people don't recognize it for what it is. And by doing so, you allow things to come into your situation that might not be for your highest good. I understand that things can get sticky when you're talking about religion. Like, for example, when I say love, like, man, you really got to reach to that like love level of vibration. It's because that is the highest vibration. Unconditional love, to be specific, is the highest vibrational like frequency that you can be at in order to connect with these things that we want to connect with, right? And
well, vocabulary matters, whether you call it God or love or whatever you call it. Yeah.
Right. And so, but when you are in that state, you're a natural repellent for anything that's evil. So that's why people are like, well, if I don't acknowledge the evil, or I'm not giving it any energy. There's truth in that for sure. There
absolutely is.
Right. But then when you completely ignore it, I think is where we allow ourselves to become deceived. Because things can present themselves. You know how many times I've seen a quote little girl that wasn't a little girl in astral? I mean, at least a few. And they talk about it all the time. It's presenting itself as something non-threatening. It's presenting itself as something that needs help even. It's a lure. I'm sorry if that's scary, but you do have to watch for these things. So for example, well, how do I know that I'm talking to a little girl that needs to be crossed over and not a demon that's trying to present itself? Well, I'll tell you exactly how you do it. For example, when we talk about earthbound spirits, you'll notice that this person, has details about them that you'll be able to pull out, right? And when I say details, it's not just
like facts and evidence.
Facts and evidence, yes, but even more so, I'm talking about details, like telling a story. It's going to tell a story,
okay,
with more details versus a generic print of a kid. Does that make sense? So yes. A demon will be like, I'm this blonde little girl that's generic. You're not going to be getting any story or way of death or personality or any of that. It's like a stamp, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when you pick up on a actual kid, you might start to get, you know, the ways of which they died and
there's
their
more evidence. There's going to be
way more evidence in there, and you're going to start to form this little person, because
kind of like somebody telling you a BS story, and you're you know, in real life, like right, and you're sitting there and you're going, 2 and 2 is not adding up here, dude. So it's like, you're telling me a story, and that's great, that's nice, but I gotta go.
right, exactly.
Okay, so it's a BS story. Yeah,
right, it's a BS story.
But you know, for somebody that's developing and they don't have that discernment yet, that's why it can be scary, which I think just kind of pops into my head, which is why it's really important to be sure that you're training with the right people, you're training in the right environment, you're setting the right intention for yourself. So I think there is some truth into being careful,
right,
about doing this kind of work from the right perspective. And I think that was what was even in the Bible. They talk about spiritual gifts. And then on the other hand, there's some passages that say, don't get lured into all of this other kind of stuff. And I think there's really truth in those things. There are spiritual gifts and we can do this higher level of connection, but, you know, be careful. Right.
So, I mean, and then when you say, for example, what is the nature of evil? It's like, to me, the nature of it is to kind of, I want to say corrupt, like it's to corrupt that which is good. It's like it wants to meddle. It wants to. I agree with that. And, you know, and I didn't. I was very naive in the beginning, as a lot of, I think sometimes mediums can be, because mediums tend to only deal with positive spirits, right? So there's very little experience with lower vibration. So that lack of experience becomes this, well, I haven't had any experience with it, therefore it doesn't exist. Which is not necessarily true. I've never broken my arm, but that doesn't mean that people haven't, right? So just because you don't have experience with it doesn't mean it happens. Doesn't mean you need to walk around being afraid that you're going to break your arm every day because it happened to someone else either. So you can take that to the other side. Then when I got that channeled information, that really long lesson that lasted about a week long, that I came over to your place and I shared that with you, that was really what started switching it for me. Now you talk about it being corrupt, but I remembered in that very lengthy lesson that I had gotten from Spirit is that God is everything. God is positive and negative. You cannot remove one from the other. And that's a very difficult thing to embrace, because we think that God is only good. But if we think of it in terms of fear is what teaches us courage, pain and suffering is what teaches us compassion and strength. And, you know, it is the lows which help us learn to embody the highs. We have to have opposition. We have to have struggle. Yeah, that's very, very good point. Someone asked, you know, are we ever gonna be fully rid of evil? Do we eradicate it or do we transmute it? And my answer every time will be transmute, because you can never fully eradicate evil because of the yin yang. For example, there's always balance. And like you said, it's almost like the nature of God is both. It is both. And that was a very difficult lesson, but really insightful. And I still want to get that written down someday, because it was so beautiful. Even in like the Vedic texts and stuff like that, they talk about Shiva being the destroyer, right? Right. But creation and destruction go together. You cannot have one without the other. Out of that destruction comes this rebirth. Exactly. Of some new, and it's evident in our in our solar system, you know, when a star dies, sometimes it creates enough energy to make a whole nother star.
Our physical death leads to a rebirth into just consciousness. Or if you look at people that have had a very serious struggle, whether it's an illness, which I associate with, or a trauma or a tragedy, and there's those people that stay stuck in that space, right?
Yeah.
That shadow space, that dark place. And then there's those who transmute and transcend that space. And not that they wanted to have their experiences, but they rose above those experiences and they go, wow, look what I learned from that experience. Right. So we think of evil as, okay, it's out there to defeat the light, and it's to do this and it's to do that. And I think we associate it with it. It's going to have more control than we are, right? It's going to take us down this negative path. And
right. And I think the thing is that we start to feel this need to eradicate it when the balance is off. Okay. So right now in our society feels really off, you know?
Gosh, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're like, oh God, how do we eradicate this? Well, it's never going to be fully eradicated, but the idea is that we begin the transmutation process. And where does that start? In ourselves.
It's the transcendence. It's right. It's the transcendence. And societies that transcend it as a collective is where you reach the more advanced society. I saw a chart yesterday where it says the US has more people in prison than like any other country. And I'm like, yeah, but we're a society that thinks that we got it like that. Look at the way our society thinks, acts, and behaves. We are a very unique society in this sense of entitlement and endowment, the lack of work ethic, the lack of a personal accountability. I wonder how much of that contributes. Is it really our laws that are so different? Or is it our ideologies? So it seems a little off, but we're talking about transcendence and transmuting. It has to happen at the personal level.
Right. Right. I mean, I don't think we're going to solve our problems on our YouTube channel, but I do think that
darn,
I know, but I do think that this realization that, and we just talked about it, you know, it's like a perception shift. It's more like I can perceive it for what it actually is, which is an imbalance, definitely. But it also takes off some of that like layer of woe is me and I can't do anything about it. Does that make sense? Because a lot of the collective, I think right now is really right there where woe is me. I have no power. I have no say. I have no nothing. I felt like that in the past. And
who hasn't? Me too. Yeah. I think it's bringing that up in people a lot right now. You know, I mean, regardless of where you fall on things, everybody's having the same emotions. We're just having it from different spaces. So when you talk about this transmutation and the transcendence over this evil, I think that kind of comes back to people get scared of evil, but that's your lack of realizing your own true power.
Right.
So that's where you have to realize I don't have to fear that. I have to recognize that it's there. I have to recognize that it's a reality. I have to recognize I could walk out the door tomorrow and someone could shoot me and I can't probably control all of that.
Exactly. And that's why I say like, don't fear death. It's like, because the most of our fears really are rooted around death. You know, I have a fear of heights. Well, why are you scared of heights? Because I might fall. Okay. And you're scared of falling because
but it's natural. I mean, our bodies are naturally designed to make us afraid of things that threaten our existence.
I get that. It's some of it is strictly based off of a survival instinct. And some of it is more of like a spiritual thing, I think, because ultimately in our physical reality right now, we don't necessarily have, I guess, what I would consider this hardcore scientific evidence that I, for 100% damn sure, am going to be on the other side,
right.
when I
And
die.
that's a very personal belief again. And you're right. So some people
Right.
are afraid of it because they haven't had the experience, or they
Right.
don't have that belief, and that's okay. That's their choice and their path to walk.
So what I'm saying is, the more that you can either accept death as a part of life, regardless of whether or not that means you're going to be nothing. Because to me, it's like, if I'm going to be nothing, I'm not going to know anyways, and it's not going to make any fucking difference. But if everything that I hope for and think I know is true, I'm going to have a great time on the other side with family and friends that I've, had plenty of evidence and validation for in this life. And it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. I don't know.
But you're right. But not everybody's in that space. And I know, because I mean, my fear of death has, even despite my mediumship, has been a very, very difficult battle for me to embrace that, because I've wanted more evidence. I've wanted more proof. I've been very skeptical. So it's tough. It's tough.
I think it's an important, I'm not saying I'm not scared of death, because this is the thing is,
it's not like we're out there going, okay, I'm good with it if it happens. No, that's not what we're saying.
Well, I am saying that I guess I'm okay with it if it happens. But what I'm not saying is that I'm ready, or what I'm not saying is that,
yes, that's what I mean. Yeah.
Or that I've completely somehow gotten over this fear, because ultimately it's like our physical bodies have this, like, no, you are scared of death, or otherwise, that we'd be like walking tightropes every day or something. I don't know, but there is this level of need to physically keep yourself alive, I guess. Or,
well, sure,
we're scared of things that could ultimately hurt or kill us. But I think the more that we work on that particular aspect,
well, sure, or asking for answers. That's what happened with me. It was like, I was to the point where I'm like, I need some evidence. I need some answers. That's what put me on a journey. I didn't get an answer in 2 days. Okay. I mean, I'm talking years worth of work.
Exactly.
So, which other people might not be like, that's okay.
Right. But this is, for us, this is a spiritual pursuit. So I think that
very much so
for people like us, we are drawn and driven to find those kinds of answers. Whereas somebody else is just like, well,
they may be a Christian or a Muslim or Jewish, and this is how they believe, and they believe what they believe, and that's okay too, right? Because that's their framework. And that, if that faith sustains them, that's really all that matters.
Right.
That's really all that matters.
I think that's the important thing, is that when we start to put faith before fear, is where you ultimately prevail.
Right. Which kind of leads us back kind of to full circle, where we were talking about the nature of evil or negative, or whatever it is that you want to call it, is that we do have more power over it than that. And that's been reiterated in the Bible multiple times, right? It's like that God is more powerful. I think that God is both. God is all, because you can't have something that's not God. And when we think of it in that perspective, which is what came through in the channel lesson, when we think of it, that even the bad is still God, we recognize that nothing is powerful than the all.
Right. Yeah.